The first time my own son blocked the front door of my house, he didn't yell. He smiled. Then he spread both arms across the doorway and said, "Dad, my in-laws are eating dinner. Just give us an hour." I stood on my own front porch holding my lunchbox from work. It was 7:18 on a rainy Thursday evening. My feet hurt, my back hurt, and the house I had paid for over 34 years was suddenly a place I wasn't allowed to enter. My name is Douglas Harper. I'm 68 years old. Until 3 months ago, I was planning to retire from the electrical supply company where I'd worked since I was 26. Then my wife, Linda, passed away after a short battle with leukemia. Everything changed after that. People think grief arrives all at once. It doesn't. It arrives in little moments. Making coffee for one. Hearing only one toothbrush in the bathroom. Walking into a quiet kitchen that used to sound like laughter. Linda and I raised one son, Ethan. For most of his life, he was a good boy. Respectful. Hard-working. The kind of kid who carried groceries for elderly neighbors without being asked. When he married Rachel 2 years ago, I thought I had gained a daughter. Rachel was charming, always smiling, always calling me Dad. She baked pies when she visited. She hugged Linda every time she came through the front door. Or at least, that was before Linda died. 2 weeks after the funeral, Ethan suggested they move in temporarily. "Dad," he said, "you shouldn't be alone." Rachel nodded. "We can help around the house." It sounded reasonable. The upstairs bedrooms were empty. The company felt nice at first. Rachel cooked. Ethan mowed the lawn. I almost believed we were helping each other heal. Then small things began changing. The television remote disappeared from the living room because Rachel wanted a cleaner look. My recliner was moved into the basement because it didn't match the decor. Family photos started coming down one by one. Rachel said the walls needed a more modern style. I told myself not to make trouble. It was only furniture, only pictures, only little things. But grief teaches you something. Little things eventually become everything. 3 months later, I was still working 4 days a week. Not because I needed the money, because sitting in an empty office hurt less than sitting in my own house where everything Linda loved kept disappearing. The Thursday it happened had been exhausting. Inventory all day, heavy boxes, rain during the drive home. I remember thinking how good a hot shower would feel. Instead, I found Ethan standing in my doorway. Behind him I could hear laughter. Silverware, wine glasses. Rachel's parents had arrived for dinner. Her father, Charles Bennett, owned a successful accounting firm across town. Her mother, Diane, never missed an opportunity to remind everyone about it. I smiled. "I'll just wash up and stay out of the way." Ethan didn't move. "Dad," he looked over his shoulder first, then back at me. "My in-laws are eating." I waited. So, Rachel appeared behind him. She lowered her voice. "We thought it would be uncomfortable." "For who?" She smiled politely. "They don't really know you yet." I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because I honestly believed I'd misunderstood. "I live here." Rachel glanced toward the dining room. "We just want tonight to go smoothly." Then Ethan said the sentence that changed everything. "Dad, you're not allowed in until they're finished." Not allowed. In my own house. Now tell me honestly, if your own child blocked the door to the home you paid for, would you have pushed past him? Or would you have walked away and let him discover what respect actually costs? Comment, "I'd walk in," if nobody could stop you from entering your own home. Or comment, "I'd stay calm if you believe quiet consequences are stronger than loud arguments." I looked at Ethan. Really looked. The little boy who once waited by the window every evening to see my truck pull into the driveway. The teenager I taught to drive. The young man whose college tuition Linda and I paid without borrowing $1. He couldn't hold my eyes. That told me everything. I turned around, walked back to my truck, and drove away. I didn't call the police. I didn't call a lawyer. I made one phone call. His name was Richard Lawson. Richard had been my business partner for 19 years before I retired from ownership. He also happened to own 40% of the property where my house sat. Not the house itself, the land beneath it. Years earlier, when Linda and I refinanced during a difficult business expansion, Richard quietly became a minority owner through a legal land agreement designed to protect both families if something ever happened to me. After the loans were paid off, we simply never changed it. Richard answered immediately. Doug, I need a favor. 20 minutes later, we met at a diner. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked only one question. Did they actually refuse to let you into your own home? Yes. He stirred his coffee slowly. Then it's time they understand exactly whose generosity they've been living under. The next morning, Richard contacted Charles Bennett. Not me, not Ethan, Rachel's father. Because Charles had been telling people his daughter and son-in-law were building their own place. Richard politely invited him to lunch. At noon, Charles learned something interesting. The house Ethan kept calling ours legally depended on agreements he had never heard about. Agreements requiring my written approval before anyone other than me could establish permanent residency or make structural changes. Richard didn't threaten. He simply explained the paperwork. Then he casually mentioned one more thing. If Douglas ever feels unwelcome in that home, several protections become active immediately. Charles stopped eating. What protections? Richard slid one document across the table. Charles read it twice. His face lost every bit of color. That evening, Rachel's parents were back at my house for another family dinner. Only this dinner sounded different. At exactly 6:42, my phone rang. It was Charles. Mr. Harper. His voice had completely changed. I think there has been a terrible misunderstanding. I don't. Silence. Then he said quietly, We're coming over. No. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. 20 minutes later, Richard called. They're all sitting at the table. What happened? Charles just pushed back his chair. Apparently, Charles had looked directly at Ethan and Rachel and asked one simple question. Did you really stop your father from entering his own home? Nobody answered. Then Charles stood up, looked around the dining room, and said something Rachel would never forget. A man who dishonors his father will eventually dishonor everyone else. The table went completely silent. Rachel tried explaining. She said they only wanted one peaceful dinner. Charles interrupted her. Then you should have invited the owner of the house. Rachel looked at Ethan. Ethan stared at his plate. Diane quietly folded her napkin. Nobody touched their food again. That night, Ethan came to my apartment. Yes, apartment. After leaving the house, I had checked into a furnished rental. Not because I had nowhere else to go. Because I wanted time to think. He knocked for almost a minute before I opened the door. His eyes were red. Dad! I waited. I'm sorry. For what? He looked surprised. For yesterday. What exactly about yesterday? He couldn't answer. Not specifically, because people who know they're wrong often apologize in general. Specific apologies require specific honesty. Finally, he whispered, I chose the easier conversation. I nodded slowly. With Rachel? Yes, and the harder conversation was respecting your father. His shoulders dropped. Yes, the following Monday we all met with my attorney. Rachel came. Charles came. Richard came. I asked only one thing, that Ethan and Rachel move out within 60 days, not because I hated them, because a home where the owner needs permission to enter is no longer a home. Rachel cried. Charles didn't defend her. Instead, he looked at his daughter and said, I raised you better than this. Those words hurt her more than anything I could have said. They moved into a rental 3 weeks later. Before leaving, Ethan carried my recliner back upstairs himself. He rehung every family photograph Rachel had taken down, including Linda's favorite wedding picture. He stood looking at it for a long time. I forgot whose house this really was. I placed my hand on his shoulder. No. He looked at me. You forgot whose love built it. There is a difference. Today I still live in that house. The photographs are back. Linda's garden is blooming again. Every Sunday Ethan visits alone, not because Rachel isn't welcome, because she asked for time to earn forgiveness instead of expecting it. Charles comes sometimes too. He always shakes my hand before leaving. The last time we sat together on the porch, he smiled and said, You know, Doug, I always wondered why Richard called me instead of you. I smiled back. Because sometimes another father needs to remind a man how fathers should be treated. He nodded. Neither of us spoke for a while. Some lessons don't require many words. My son thought blocking a doorway would impress his wife's family. Instead, it showed them exactly the kind of man he had become. And the person who silenced that dinner table wasn't me. It was another father who refused to celebrate respect at a table built on disrespect.